The champagne glasses froze mid-air. The orchestra went silent. And in the center of the most exclusive party in Hollywood history, Marilyn Monroe did something that would end her career, or so everyone thought. What happened next wouldn't just change one life. It would shatter everything Hollywood believed about power, class, and what it meant to be a star. It was June 18, 1955, at the Bel-Air estate of studio executive Harrison Caldwell. This wasn't just any party. This was the party. The kind of event where studio heads made million-dollar deals over cocktails, where careers were born and destroyed between the appetizer and dessert, where the guest list read like a who's who of American entertainment. 300 of Hollywood's most powerful people were in attendance. Directors who could greenlight any project. Producers who controlled which actors worked and which ones didn't. Stars whose names alone could open a movie. And there in the center of it all was Marilyn Monroe. In 1955, Marilyn was at the absolute peak of her powers. The 7-year itch had just been released, and that iconic scene of her standing over the subway grate with her white dress billowing around her had become the single most recognizable image in American cinema. She wasn't just a movie star, she was a phenomenon. A cultural force. The most photographed woman in the world. When Marilyn walked into a room, gravity shifted. Conversations stopped. People stared, not just because she was beautiful, though she was breathtakingly so, but because she radiated something that transcended mere physical attractiveness. She had presence. She had magic. Tonight she was wearing a champagne-colored silk gown that seemed to shimmer in the candlelight of Caldwell's ballroom. Her platinum blonde hair was styled in those soft, perfect curls that had become her signature. Diamond earrings, borrowed from the studio, as most of her jewelry was, caught the light every time she moved her head. She looked like she had stepped out of a dream, and everyone at the party knew it. But what most people at that party didn't know, what the cameras and the magazines and the gossip columnists never captured, was that underneath that shimmering gown and that famous smile, Marilyn Monroe was exhausted. She was tired of being treated like a beautiful object rather than a serious actress. Tired of the studio system that controlled every aspect of her life. Tired of the constant pressure to be perfect, to be sexy, to be the fantasy that everyone wanted her to be. She was reading Dostoevsky in her trailer between takes. She was studying at the Actors Studio in New York, working with Lee Strasberg to develop her craft. She was fighting, constantly fighting, to be seen as more than just a pretty face. But tonight, she had put all of that aside. Tonight, she was playing the role that Hollywood expected of her. The glamorous movie star, the sex symbol, the woman that every man wanted and every woman wanted to be. She moved through the party with practiced grace, accepting compliments, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, allowing herself to be photographed with studio executives who saw her as nothing more than a profitable commodity. The ballroom was spectacular. Caldwell had spared no expense. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm golden glow over the crowd. Long tables were laden with more food than 300 people could possibly eat. Lobster, caviar, prime rib. Champagne flowed like water. A 12-piece orchestra played in the corner, providing a soundtrack of sophisticated jazz that made everyone feel like they were living in the pinnacle of American glamour. French doors opened onto a terrace that overlooked the manicured gardens and the glittering lights of Los Angeles below. This was Hollywood aristocracy at its finest. This was where power lived and breathed and made its deals, and everyone in that room knew it. Marilyn was standing near the terrace doors, trapped in a conversation with two producers who were discussing her next film as if she weren't standing right there. They were talking about her body, about camera angles, about how to make her look even sexier in the upcoming shoot. She was nodding politely, that famous smile never wavering, even as something inside her recoiled at being discussed like a piece of meat. That's when she heard it. A voice from the hallway just outside the ballroom. A young woman's voice, shaking with tears. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to." And then a man's voice, cold and cruel. "You're just a servant. Know your place. You're here to serve drinks, not to be seen or heard. Do you understand me?" Marilyn excused herself from the producers mid-sentence and walked toward the hallway. What she saw there would change everything. A young woman, probably no more than 19 or 20 years old, was standing against the wall. She was wearing the black and white uniform of the catering staff. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Her face was streaked with tears, and she was clutching a serving tray so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. Standing in front of her, his face red with anger, was Victor Masterson, one of the most powerful producers in Hollywood. A man who could make or break careers with a single phone call. "I said, do you understand me?" Marston was saying, his voice dripping with contempt. "You spilled champagne on my shoe, my Italian leather shoe. You're lucky I don't have you fired right now." "I'm so sorry, Mr. Masterson," the young woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone bumped into me, I didn't mean to." "I don't care what you meant to do," Masterson snapped. "You're staff. You're here to be invisible, but instead, you've made a spectacle of yourself. You're an embarrassment." There were other people in the hallway now, other guests who had heard the commotion and had come to see what was happening. But no one was intervening. No one was telling Masterson to stop. They were just watching, some with amusement, others with indifference. This was how things worked. This was the natural order of Hollywood. The powerful could say whatever they wanted to the powerless, and no one would stop them. But then Marilyn stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the hallway like a knife through silk. "Is there a problem here?" Masterson turned to look at her, and his expression immediately softened. "Marilyn," he said, his voice suddenly warm and friendly, "no problem at all, just dealing with some incompetent help. Nothing for you to worry about." Marilyn looked at the young woman, who was staring at the floor, still clutching her tray, tears running down her face. Then she looked back at Masterson, and something in her expression changed. The famous Marilyn Monroe smile disappeared completely, replaced by something harder, something that the people in that hallway had never seen from her before. "What's your name?" Marilyn asked the young woman. The girl looked up, startled. "Me? Yes, you," Marilyn said gently. "What's your name?" "Sarah," the girl said quietly. "Sarah Bennett." "Sarah," Marilyn repeated. "That's a beautiful name." She turned back to Masterson. "What exactly did Sarah do that was so terrible?" Masterson laughed, clearly not taking this seriously. "She spilled champagne on my shoe, Marilyn. It's not a big deal. I was just making sure she understands that she needs to be more careful." "By making her cry?" Marilyn asked. "By humiliating her in front of everyone." The hallway had gone very quiet now. More people were gathering, drawn by the sight of Marilyn Monroe confronting Victor Masterson. This wasn't how these things worked. Movie stars didn't confront producers, especially not female movie stars, especially not over something as insignificant as a servant. Masterson's expression hardened. "Marilyn, I think you're overreacting. This is none of your concern." But Marilyn wasn't backing down. "You called her just a servant. You told her to know her place. Is that what you said?" "She is just a servant," Masterson said, his voice rising. "That's not an insult. That's a fact. She's here to work, not to—" "She's a human being," Marilyn interrupted, and her voice was shaking now, not with fear, but with anger. Real, genuine anger. "She's a person who deserves to be treated with respect, just like anyone else in this house." The people in the hallway were staring now. Some were shocked. Others were fascinated. This was Marilyn Monroe, the ultimate Hollywood fantasy, standing up to one of the most powerful men in the industry, over a waitress. It was unprecedented. Masterson laughed again, but there was no humor in it. "Marilyn, sweetheart, I think you've had too much champagne. Why don't you go back to the party and let me handle this?" But Marilyn didn't move. Instead, she did something that no one in that hallway expected. She took Sarah's hand. The young woman looked up at her in absolute shock, tears still streaming down her face. And Marilyn, still holding her hand, walked back into the ballroom. The music was still playing. The conversations were still flowing. The party was still going on, as if nothing had happened. But Marilyn, with Sarah's hand in hers, walked directly to the center of the room, to the exact spot where everyone could see her, where all 300 guests would have no choice but to pay attention. She raised her free hand, and the gesture alone was enough. The orchestra stopped playing. The conversations died mid-sentence. 300 faces turned to look at Marilyn Monroe, standing in the center of the ballroom in her champagne silk gown, holding the hand of a young woman in a catering uniform. The silence was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in that massive ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marilyn said, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the room, "I need your attention for just a moment." Harrison Caldwell, the host, was making his way toward her, his face confused and concerned. But Marilyn held up her hand, stopping him. "Just a moment, Harrison, please." She turned to address the crowd, still holding Sarah's hand. "I want to introduce you to someone very important. This is Sarah Bennett. Sarah has been working tonight, serving us drinks, making sure we're all taken care of, making sure this beautiful party runs smoothly. She's been on her feet for hours, taking care of everyone here." People were exchanging glances. Studio executives were frowning. This wasn't how these things worked. The staff was supposed to be invisible. You didn't introduce them to the guests. You certainly didn't stop a party to talk about them. "A few minutes ago," Marilyn continued, "Sarah accidentally spilled a small amount of champagne on someone's shoe. It was an accident, the kind of thing that happens at parties when there are 300 people and everyone is moving around. And for that accident, she was humiliated. She was told that she's just a servant. She was told to know her place." The ballroom was still silent, but now the silence had a different quality. It was uncomfortable, tense. People were starting to understand where this was going, and they didn't like it. Marilyn's voice grew stronger. "I've been thinking a lot lately about places, about where people belong, about who gets to decide who's important and who isn't. And I've realized something. The people we often treat as invisible, the people we don't even notice, are often the ones who make everything possible." She gestured around the room. "Sarah and the other people working tonight are the reason this party is happening. They cooked this food. They poured these drinks. They made sure every detail was perfect so that we could enjoy ourselves. And yet when one of them makes a small, understandable mistake, we think we have the right to belittle them, to remind them that they're just servants, to put them in their place." Victor Masterson had entered the ballroom now, his face dark with anger, but he couldn't interrupt, not when Marilyn Monroe had the attention of every person in the room, not when 300 of Hollywood's most powerful people were hanging on her every word. "I want to ask you all a question," Marilyn said. "What makes someone important? Is it money? Is it fame? Is it power? Because if that's all it takes, then I guess I'm important. I'm famous. I'm on magazine covers. I make movies that millions of people watch. But you know what? That doesn't make me better than Sarah. It doesn't make me more valuable as a human being. It just means I got lucky. I got opportunities that Sarah hasn't had yet." She turned to look at Sarah, who was staring at her with wide, disbelieving eyes. "Sarah, how old are you?" 20, Sarah whispered. 20 years old, Marilyn said to the crowd. "Working at this party to make money, probably to pay for school or rent, or to help her family. Working hard, trying to do a good job. And when she makes one small mistake, she gets treated like she's nothing." Marilyn's voice broke slightly, and everyone in that room could hear the genuine emotion in it. "I know what it's like to be treated like you're nothing. Before I was Marilyn Monroe, I was Norma Jane. I was an orphan. I was a girl who nobody wanted. I worked in a factory. I did whatever I could to survive. And people looked at me the same way some of you are looking at Sarah right now. Like I was invisible. Like I didn't matter." The ballroom was absolutely transfixed. This wasn't the Marilyn Monroe they knew. This wasn't the giggly blonde from the movies. This was someone real, someone raw, someone who was showing them a part of herself they had never seen before. "But I did matter," Marilyn continued. "Just like Sarah matters. Just like every single person working in this house tonight matters. And I'll tell you something else. The way we treat people who can't do anything for us, people who have no power over us, that's what shows who we really are. It's easy to be kind to a studio head who can give you a job. It's easy to be respectful to a producer who controls your career. But being kind to someone who can't do anything for you, that's real character. That's real class." She turned back to the crowd, and her famous smile returned, but it was different now. It was fierce. It was challenging. "So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to stay at this party for one more hour, and I'm going to spend that hour with Sarah. We're going to sit together. We're going to talk. We're going to eat some of this incredible food that she and her colleagues prepared. And I invite anyone who wants to join us to do so. Anyone who understands that a person's worth isn't determined by their job title or their bank account." Marilyn walked over to one of the tables and pulled out a chair. She gestured for Sarah to sit. The young woman, still in shock, still crying, but now crying for different reasons, sat down, and Marilyn sat next to her. For a long moment, nobody moved. 300 people stood frozen, unsure of what to do. This was social suicide. Sitting with the staff, choosing a waitress over the most powerful people in Hollywood. It was unthinkable. But then something remarkable happened. A woman in an elegant black dress stepped forward. Katharine Hepburn, one of the greatest actresses of her generation, walked over to the table and sat down across from Marilyn and Sarah. She looked at the young woman and smiled. "Sarah, was it? Tell me, dear, what do you do when you're not serving champagne to overpaid actors?" And just like that, the dam broke. More people started moving toward the table. Not everyone, not even a majority, but enough. A screenwriter sat down, then a costume designer, then an assistant director, then more. People who understood what Marilyn was really doing. People who were brave enough or decent enough to stand with her. Within minutes, there were about 40 people gathered around that table, and the ones nearby. They were talking to Sarah, asking her questions, treating her like a person rather than a piece of furniture. Sarah, who had been crying in a hallway 10 minutes ago, was now the center of attention at the most exclusive party in Hollywood, and she was smiling. But not everyone joined. Victor Marston stood at the edge of the ballroom, his face purple with rage. Other studio executives were whispering among themselves, clearly unhappy with what was happening. Harrison Caldwell looked like he wanted to intervene, but didn't know how. This was his party, but Marilyn had taken it over completely. After about half an hour, Masterson finally approached the table. "Marilyn," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Can I speak with you for a moment? Privately?" Marilyn looked up at him and smiled sweetly. Anything you want to say to me, Victor, you can say in front of Sarah and everyone else here. Masterson's jaw clenched. Fine. You've made your point. Very dramatic. Very touching. But you're making a fool of yourself. And you're embarrassing everyone here. This girl is staff. This is inappropriate. What's inappropriate? Marilyn said, and her voice was ice cold, is the way you spoke to her. What's inappropriate is making a young woman cry because of a minor accident. What's inappropriate is thinking that your expensive shoes are more important than basic human decency. I could end your career, Masterson said quietly. One phone call, that's all it would take. The table went silent. Everyone heard it. Everyone understood what was happening. This was the moment. This was where Marilyn either backed down or sacrificed everything she had worked for. Marilyn stood up slowly. She looked Masterson directly in the eye, and when she spoke, every person in that ballroom could hear her. Then make the call, she said, because I would rather lose every movie, every magazine cover, every penny I've ever made, than spend one more second pretending that people like you are better than people like Sarah. Make the call, Victor. I dare you. The ballroom was so quiet, you could hear people breathing. 300 of Hollywood's most powerful people were watching Marilyn Monroe, the biggest star in the world, risk everything for a waitress she had just met. It was the most dramatic moment most of them had ever witnessed. Masterson stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked around the room, at all the faces watching him, and he understood that he had already lost. If he actually made that call, if he actually tried to destroy Marilyn's career over this, the story would spread, and he would become the villain. The man who was so petty, so cruel, that he tried to ruin Marilyn Monroe for defending a waitress. This is ridiculous, he muttered. And then he turned and walked out of the party. As soon as he left, the ballroom erupted. Not in applause, but in conversation. Everyone was talking at once, processing what had just happened. Some people were excited, energized by what they had witnessed. Others were uncomfortable, unsure of what this meant for the established order of things. But everyone knew they had just witnessed something historic. Marilyn sat back down next to Sarah. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. Sarah was crying again, but she was also laughing. "Miss Monroe, I can't believe you just did that. You could lose everything because of me." "Call me Marilyn," Marilyn said, taking her hand again. "And you're not the reason I might lose anything. Victor Masterson's cruelty is the reason. His belief that he's better than you is the reason. I just refuse to pretend that I agreed with him." Katharine Hepburn leaned forward. "What Marilyn isn't telling you, dear, is that she just changed the game for all of us. That man won't dare retaliate. Not after what just happened here tonight." The rest of the party continued, but it was different now. The people who had gathered around Marilyn's table stayed there. They talked with Sarah. They learned that she was studying literature at UCLA, that she was working 3 jobs to pay her tuition, that she dreamed of becoming a teacher. They learned that she loved poetry and classic films, and had grown up in a small town in Oregon. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a person with dreams and fears and hopes, just like everyone else. And Marilyn listened to all of it. She asked questions. She shared her own stories. She told Sarah about growing up in foster homes, about the times she had been made to feel invisible, about how she still felt that way sometimes even now, even with all her fame. "The cameras and the magazine covers don't change how it feels inside," Marilyn said quietly. "They don't erase the memories of being told you're not good enough. That's why moments like this matter, because everyone deserves to feel like they're good enough. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity." As the evening wound down, Marilyn did something else that surprised everyone. She asked Harrison Caldwell for his address book. Then she made some phone calls. By the end of the night, Sarah had 3 job interviews lined up. A producer who had been at the table needed an assistant. A director was looking for a scriptreader. A talent agency was interested in meeting her because, as one agent said, anyone Marilyn Monroe goes to bat for deserves a chance. When it was time to leave, Marilyn hugged Sarah goodbye. "You're going to do amazing things," she told her. "Don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong. You belong anywhere you want to be." Sarah, tears streaming down her face, could barely speak. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me." "I saw myself in you," Marilyn said simply, "and I remembered what it felt like to be invisible. I never want anyone to feel that way, if I can help it." The story of what happened at Harrison Caldwell's party spread through Hollywood like wildfire. By the next morning, it was in all the gossip columns. Marilyn Monroe stops party to defend waitress. Monroe confronts producer over treatment of staff. Hollywood's biggest star takes stand for the little guy. The reactions were mixed. Some people praised Marilyn for her courage and her compassion. Others criticized her for making a scene, for embarrassing a powerful producer, for violating the unwritten rules of Hollywood society. But everyone was talking about it. Victor Marston never did make that phone call. He couldn't. Public opinion had turned against him too strongly. Instead, he quietly told people that it had been a misunderstanding and that he had nothing but respect for Marilyn. Nobody believed him, but it didn't matter. The damage to his reputation was already done. For Marilyn, there were consequences. Some producers became wary of working with her, afraid that she might cause similar scenes on their sets. But others, the good ones, the ones who valued integrity over ego, wanted to work with her even more. They had seen that she was willing to stand up for what was right, even at great personal cost. That kind of courage was rare in Hollywood. Sarah Bennett did become a teacher, eventually. But first she worked as a scriptreader, then as a development assistant, and finally as a producer herself. She never forgot what Marilyn had done for her. Years later, when she was producing her first film, she made sure that every member of her crew, from the stars to the craft services workers, was treated with equal respect and dignity. "Marilyn taught me that power isn't about making people feel small," Sarah said in an interview decades later. "It's about lifting people up." She could have ignored what happened to me. She could have stayed silent to protect her career. But she chose to speak up. She chose me over all of them. That choice changed my life, and it taught me how to live mine. The night of June 18, 1955, became legendary in Hollywood for different reasons, depending on who was telling the story. For some, it was the night Marilyn Monroe proved she was difficult, temperamental, unable to follow the rules. For others, it was the night she proved she was brave, principled, willing to sacrifice for her beliefs. But for the 40 people who sat at that table with Sarah Bennett, the 40 people who chose to join Marilyn in standing up for basic human decency, it was the night they remembered that fame and power and money weren't the things that made you truly important. It was how you treated people who couldn't do anything for you. It was choosing compassion over convention. It was refusing to let cruelty go unchallenged. Marilyn Monroe was many things in her life. She was a movie star, a sex symbol, a troubled soul, a brilliant actress, a complicated woman. But on that night, in that moment, she was something even more important. She was the kind of person who saw someone being hurt and decided to do something about it, even when it cost her. She was the kind of person who understood that true beauty wasn't about how you looked in a photograph. It was about how you treated people when no one was watching. Except that night, everyone was watching, and what they saw was Marilyn Monroe at her absolute best, not playing a role, not performing for the cameras, just being genuinely, courageously human. The party ended around 2 in the morning. The guests went home. The staff cleaned up and went home too. But the story lived on. It became part of Hollywood mythology, a reminder that sometimes the most important moments aren't the ones that happen on screen. They're the ones that happen in real life, when someone has to choose between what's easy and what's right. Marilyn chose right, and in doing so she left 300 people speechless, changed one young woman's life forever, and created a moment that would be remembered and talked about for generations to come. If this incredible story of courage and compassion moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear about the power of standing up for others. Have you ever witnessed someone use their privilege to help someone powerless? Let us know in the comments. And remember, you don't have to be famous to make a difference in someone's life. You just have to care enough to act.